We have a good crowd tonight. We're going to wrap up our study on demons tonight, Satan. Now, Sunday morning, I'm not preaching a message again about this. Now, I'm going to be preaching some, just stories. I want to give you a little bit of just background. You've probably heard this before. We give you some background of all of this. And I'm hoping we finish tonight. If not, we'll finish next 2 weeks on Wednesday night. In fact, looking at the clock, yeah, I think we finished. Well, we've talked about angels. Has anybody seen any since then? Watch baseball? Paul, we've seen.
My wife.
Demons. We're talking about demons right now.
The mirror.
I knew somebody'd say something cheesy like that. But then, anyway, we talked about that, about Satan. So we're going to look tonight at several things. First, the character of Satan. It's pretty easy. Satan, you can sum his character up in one word. And that word is what? Evil. Plain and simple. One word, evil. Now, we don't know why Satan rebelled. When we look at Scripture, we have some hints, and most people, the common interpretation of some of those passages we said, is that he is a fallen angel, and it was a sin of pride, greed, perhaps, that he wanted to be more powerful than God. And so, and we have heard that. In Matthew, we talked last week about the titles of Satan, about the names of Satan. But also, you see some, I've got to take my glass off because I can't see a thing. I can hear, I just can't see. You know what I mean? What? Anyway, sorry, I can't hear any of it. No, there are parables. Matthew 13, verse 4 is a parable of the sower. Do you remember the 4 soils? They sowed seed. Okay, it says, as he sowed, some seeds fell beside the road, and the birds came and ate them up. Then verse 19 says, if anyone hears the word of the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches away what has been sown in his heart. This is one on whom the seed was sown beside the road. So the evil one comes, talking about Satan. The other day, I'll just tell you, because she's not going to, just don't tell on me. Don't tell her I told the story. But Eva I was out there working on their stuff. I'm finished now. But Eva was really upset. Why are you doing this? He's videotaping me. I don't like that. Preachers don't like me. Well, some preachers, I guess, do. Money. Send money in. You send $100, you're going to get $1,000 back because Linda's going to give it to you. Is that better? We need money. Money, 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 money. Show me the money. I'm sorry. Steve, I apologize. Okay, I shouldn't be joking about money. Now, what was I saying? Anyway, I'm not even going to tell that story now. But here's the problem. We talk about Christ. We share Christ with someone. And it's not that people just reject God. If you've ever shared your faith and talked about Jesus, first of all, to be able to sit down and explain the whole, all of the plan of salvation, it would take quite a bit of time. And people usually don't hear that. And if they do, it's not that they're rejecting you, the gospel, or you. They just don't understand. Most of the time. I read somewhere, and I can't tell you where I read it because I don't remember. It was 20 years ago when I was working on my book and everything. But I read that on average, it takes about 7 times of hearing the gospel before a person comes to Christ. Gary, what have you heard about that? Have you heard about that? So, where did you hear it? I don't remember. I just know I've heard that. I've read it somewhere. But it's about 7 times on average. And when a person hears the gospel, and first of all, you can't push them to accept Christ. If you share Christ, if I say I'm sharing Christ and I tell somebody, I tell you how to be saved, and I say, now if you confess with your mouth, now let's do it right now. A person's going to kind of step back a little bit. Well, again, they're not rejecting you. Sometimes it's just not quite understanding. Well, anyway, the evil one comes and snatches away what has been sown. So Satan is active in trying to keep people from coming to Christ. We read in 2 Corinthians chapter 4 that he blinds the minds of unbelievers. He is actively keeping people from Christ. And he appears as, in another parable, he appears as the sower of seeds among the wheat. Matthew 13:25. But while his men were sleeping, his enemy came and sowed tares, those were weeds, among the wheat and went away. And he said to him in verse 28, an enemy has done this. The slave said, do you want us then to go and gather them up? Well, the enemy came and put tares, those are weeds. And it's a weed that looks a lot like the wheat. When it matures, you can tell the difference, but until then, you can't. And so Satan does this. Again, anything he can do to destroy what God is trying to do. Anything he can do. In John 10:12, Satan is called a wolf. It says he is a hired hand, not a shepherd, who is not the owner of the sheep. Sees the wolf coming, leaves the sheep and flees. The wolf snatches them and scatters them, talking about Satan. And also 1 Peter, we read this last Sunday, 1 Peter 5:8, be of sober spirit, be on the alert. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion seeking someone to devour. So it tells us Satan is active in seeking to destroy. You know, when you stop and think about it, every time, every church I've ever been in, that where people start doing something for God, starting a new ministry, doing something, problems always come up. Anybody else ever experienced that? If you could just go back and look at the churches that are starting new ministries, starting new classes, starting new outreach programs, starting, something new for youth or children, problems always come. Why? Because Satan wants to destroy what God is doing. I think if we'd all sit back and look, we'd probably think of a time that that's happened. Well, Revelation 12:9, Satan's the great dragon. We read this last week, the serpent. And so we can sum up Satan's character in one word, and that's evil. Anybody have any words about that they want to say about that before we move on? Trying to do this more like teaching and trying to get you to respond. You haven't been in Sunday school in a long time. And Steve, I know, would appreciate some response. No? Okay. Well, what about the minions of Satan? In other words, what about his followers? Demons. Many believe that they are fallen angels. Revelation 12:3-4 says, then another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns. And on his head were 7 diadems, and his tail swept away a third. And this is where, remember we talked about when Satan was cast out of heaven and took a third of the angels with him, fallen angels. This is where this comes from. And his tail swept away a third of the stars of heaven and threw them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so when she gave birth, he might devour the child. In verse 9. And the great dragon was thrown down, the serpent of old, who is called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. So here, the demons are called angels. So we said that they are fallen angels. The angels were cast down with him. A third of them. And we already said that they are innumerable. So how many were there exactly? There were a bunch. It's about the best we can do. We don't know the number. They're also in Matthew 10:1 called unclean spirits. Matthew 10:1 says, Jesus summoned his 12 disciples and gave them authority over unclean spirits to cast them out and to heal every kind of disease and every kind of sickness. I want to say something about casting out demons. There was a popular movie, and it's very popular in our society to have what are called exorcisms. I mean, people think about that among churches. The movie The Exorcist, I've never seen it, believe that. If you have, the Catholic Church is really big on exorcising demons. Baptists need to be more about exercising, but, because we've gained a little weight, we don't do it like we should. I can just see demons in sweatpants with those little headbands on, exercising. That's not quite what that means. But verses like this, there are a few things, talk about casting out. Now, Nowhere in Scripture do you find where they have a big, get around this demon and cast him out. The only one you find is where Jesus and the Gadarene demoniac, right? Okay, that's the only really example that you see, and that was Jesus doing that. And then here, of course, it says that he gave the power to cast them out. Now, based on these verses, I do not believe that we need to begin, we could probably be popular, but I don't think we need to take this on as a ministry of casting out demons or exorcising demons. Anybody want to take that on? No, I don't. You just don't see that enough in Scripture. We'll talk about activity in just a moment about demon possession, but that's more of a other church type thing. Well, what about what do demons do? Their activity. Everything that they do leads to immorality. They are evil. Nothing but evil. 1 Timothy 4:1-3 says, but the Spirit explicitly says that in later times some will fall away from the faith, paying attention to deceitful spirits and the doctrines of demons, by means of the hypocrisy of liars, seared in their own conscience as with a branding iron. Men who forbid marriage and advocate abstaining from foods which God has created to be gratefully shared in by those who believe and know the truth. So in the later times, I believe, since, most people believe we're living in later times. We don't know when that's going to be, but anyway, they pay attention to deceitful spirits and doctrines of demons and their lies. We see this today, do we not? We see a lot of doctrine, and I shared this Sunday, that comes from greed. Anytime you want material riches, and like I said about the preacher Sunday, I think everybody was here, that's greed. That's greed. I started to ask you a question, I don't think I want to ask that question. But, there's a problem. Well, a lot of people buy lottery tickets. I was going to ask how many of you are bought one. I'm not going to ask that. Some people buy lottery tickets and thinking that they're going to win something. Well, I'm convinced that's the Indians' revenge on white man. The casinos, all that stuff. The casinos I'm talking about. But we're talking about greed. Nothing but greed. Well, what else do demons do? They try to destroy the purpose of God. They fight against God's purpose. Anything that they can do to destroy what God is doing, I believe they will do. If a church is comfortable and just sitting, doing nothing, then they pretty much leave you alone. Revelation 16, verse 13 through 16, this is a New Living Translation. It says, and I saw 3 evil spirits. Do you know what demons look like, by the way? It tells us here. I saw 3 evil spirits that looked like frogs. So when you picture a demon, they look like frogs. Here, this New Living. Anyway, that look like frogs leap from the mouths of the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet. They are demonic spirits who work miracles and go out to all the rulers of the world to gather them for battle against the Lord on that great judgment day of God the Almighty. Look, I will come as unexpectedly as a thief. Blessed are all who are watching for me, who keep their clothing ready so they will not have to walk around naked and ashamed. And the demonic spirits gathered all the rulers and their armies to a place with the Hebrew name, guess what? Armageddon. So, and then also, they do what Satan wants them to do. Ephesians 6:11, put on the full armor of God, so you will be able to stand firm against the schemes of the devil. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against powers, against the world forces of this darkness, against the spiritual thrones of wickedness in the heavenly places. How many of you have ever read a book by, I know the name of the book, but I can't think of the author. But the name of the book is called This Present Darkness. Anybody ever read that? My wife loved that book. That was the first one, and then there was what were the other ones called? I don't remember. There are three of them. I have them somewhere. But this present darkness, it's about a small town preacher. And what the author does is he portrays demons. And I don't agree with the theology of it, but it's a very, very good book. But he portrays demons as, and describes them as being, hideous and all that, wings and all everything. And he says, like, there's a demon, and you see this sort of in charismatic circles. There's a demon of greed, a demon of lust, a demon of, every sin has its own specific demon. And I don't see that in Scripture anywhere. But it's the book, it kind of helps you see, as long as you understand this is not really based on good theology. Well, anyway, this book, this present darkness, it just talks, it's a spiritual warfare between these demons and what Satan's plan is for this town and how they have revival and everything. And it's certainly worth the read, isn't it? It's good. It kind of opens your eyes, and again, as long as you understand that this is not exactly how it is, but it's still a very good book. Well, they can also be used by God. Now, here's a funny thing. Demons are not just demons, but people, lost people, can be used by God to fulfill the purpose of God. In 2 Corinthians 12:7, it says, because of the surpassing greatness of his revelations, this is Paul, when he had the thorn, he says, for this reason, to keep me from exalting myself, there was given me a thorn in the flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me, to keep me from exalting myself. So the thorn in the flesh was a messenger of Satan to torment him. We don't know exactly what that was, but whatever it was, God used it to keep Paul from thinking too highly of himself. And if God can do that, think what he can do with other things. God is moving in our world. He's not moving just among Christians. I believe that God orchestrates everything regardless of who people are in our world. He's in charge of everything. He's sovereign. And I believe that he can move and he can work and he can bring things about to work the way he wants them. And that's why I don't worry about a lot of things, because I know God is in control and God is on his throne. But what else can demons do? And here's one that we see that, I'm kind of like, I wonder if I should say anything about this one. But I will. Evil spirits can inflict disease. Think about this for a moment. You say, wait a minute, they can't do that. Let me read the scripture first. Matthew 9:33. After the demon was cast out, it was a man who was born mute. The mute man spoke. And the crowds were amazed, saying nothing like this has ever been seen in Israel. So when the demon was cast out, then the man was able to speak. Luke 13. There was a woman who was for 18 years had had a sickness caused by a spirit. And she was bent double and could not straighten up at all. In verse 16, this is Luke 13. And this woman, a daughter of Abraham as she was, whom Satan had bound for 18 long years, should she not have been released from this bond on the Sabbath day? We don't often think about this sort of thing. But we have to do something with the scripture of Satan holding her in bondage for 18 years. What do we do with that? Well, let's talk for a moment about demon possession. How many of you have ever been possessed? Just kidding. The Bible speaks of demon possession. Matthew 4:24 says, the news about Jesus spread through all Syria, and they brought to him all who were ill, those suffering with various diseases and pains, demoniacs, epileptics, paralytics, and he healed them. Demoniacs talking about being possessed by demons. Now, what's the difference? Oh, wait, let me ask this question. Can demons possess animals?
Yes.
I tell you, those goats out there, how many have never seen a goat up close? Stared at his eyes. You guys have? Yeah, when you look at a goat, the eyes run this way. And they look evil. Don't they? Yeah, they look. When I went out there and looked at that thing, they got up here like this, through the fence, of course. And I was like, man, I don't like these things. These are some evil animals. Got the devil in them. No. Well, can demons possess animals?
Yes.
Okay, Mark, I don't think we see that much, unless one's Cujo maybe, but Mark 5:13, Jesus gave them permission in coming out to talk about the unclean spirits. The unclean spirits entered the swine, the pigs. Remember that story? So yes, they did. And then the herd rushed down the steep bank into the sea, about 2,000 of them, and drowned in the sea. So yes, they entered them, and then God destroyed them. So let's talk about possession for a moment. Possession versus influence. I do not believe that Christians can be possessed by a demon. And it's very simple. The indwelling spirit. God's spirit lives within us. How can a demon live there too? Now, I believe in demonic influence. What do I mean by that?
Temptation.
Can demons,
The devil make you do it?
okay, can demons influence people?
Sure.
You know, yes, but a lot of times what we think might be, and you know the passage in James I'm going to read, says, but each one is tempted when he's carried away and enticed by his own lust. So we have that sin nature. So sometimes it's our sin nature that leads us and draws us into sin. And sometimes that demonic influence. We see that influence everywhere in our world. Everywhere. I mean, it doesn't take much to walk outside, drive down the street, and see the influence of demons in our world. What kind of influence do they have? Give me some idea. What?
They have a lot of internet, television, movies.
Amen.
All these children that are exposed to Satan's tactics every day of their lives.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's not just the things that you're talking about, it's also the things about greed. Our society as a whole defines success as bigger and better and, you know, more toys, more things, right? Boats, cars, bigger your bank account, bigger your house, the more successful you are. Is that not demonic influence? Because that is not success. I like that old bumper sticker. He who dies with the most toys still dies. Yeah.
I'll tell you one thing. There's a preacher that ran statistics on the children, influence of the children. I'm sorry, just a moment. And he was talking about the very thing we're talking about tonight, the influence of Satan. It's enough from the adults, but the children's the one he's after, the teenagers, because that's our future America and world.
Well, there's
65% of 11-year-old children, and they've got the stats on this, have already watched pornography. 65% of 11-year-olds. And that's just one statistic that will rack your brain up. It's a sad day we're living in.
like I said, you know, we think of some of those things, but greed. You know, we often don't think of greed. If you could sit in the 5th grade classroom and listen to some of these kids talk about other kids, I remember that. Kids, not saying you guys do, I'm saying you know, kids are mean. They can be mean. Even little ones can be mean. And of course, again, part of that is just our nature of sin. You know, you put a toy out, give a toy to a kid, and 10 minutes later some other kid wants it, the fight's going to be on, right? You know, you can see that. Right? And so I can't, you know, with masks, some of you have masks, I can't, did you say something? Oh, I was looking at Larry, I thought Larry was saying it.
He was.
Oh, he was, okay, so I can't tell.
Because he used to be one of those kids.
Yeah, mine, this is mine, don't, yeah.
One of the very first words is what?
Yeah, mine, yep.
Back in my own life, we had a teacher that was absolutely a sweetheart. And we noticed that there was an issue that we began to not be as smart. We began to be very ugly and mean and angry is the spirit that I think he was dealing with. And we went, I was blessed to have people around me in that school that when I brought it to the attention of the other Christian doing there, said, let's just go to the pastor and see. And that's when I began to believe wholeheartedly in demons and the influence. I don't want to say power, they have no power, but the influence that they had. We walked around in his classrooms praying and rebuking. Yes, we had that authority to rebuke demons. And I felt the presence of that, whatever it was. And we flushed it out, we'll put it that way. And after that, the whole countenance of that person changed back to where it was before. And I thought, it's scary when you see the influence that the Satan does have with demonic activities, trying to just change your whole mindset. And there's people that find it out there.
It's also very subtle. Satan does a lot of, our demons, they don't just ride out, frontal assault. Everything's real subtle, if you've ever noticed. It begins young and just builds and tells people that the church isn't relevant today. You ever notice, and this, I guess we'll wrap up, but something that really perturbs me, I guess, is how churches today always, they feel the need to say, we're relevant. We want to be relevant. The gospel has always been relevant in society, always. Sin has not changed. Our methods, people need to understand that people are lost in sin. And I've always said you can't get a person saved till you get them lost. They need to understand that. And churches that they claim to be relevant are churches that try to adapt to culture. And we don't need to adapt to culture. We don't need to be in the 50s, 60s, 70s, now whatever. We just need to preach the gospel and be who we are. And if you are a person that prefers to, live with no internet, whatever, or whatever, I'm just saying, be who you are. But the gospel is always relevant for people, regardless. But that's one thing that churches try to be modern, relevant. What are some of the other buzzwords that are being used today?